It was fence wire that first set the day wrong. Snapped clean like a wishbone, likely from the night winds that rattled through the cottonwoods east of my pasture. I was out early, same as always, leather gloves stiff from frost and coffee gone cold in the tin cup by the post. I never minded quiet. Most men don't, till it's the only thing left talking back. While I was cinching a new length of wire, something tugged at the edge of it. Not the wind, not an animal. A sound, faint, like a child crying, but held too long in the throat, the way grief gets strangled into silence. I paused, leaned my ear toward Braddock's property. Smoke from their chimney curled skyward, lazy and unbothered. No movement, no hollering, nothing to explain it. Still, I couldn't shake the way that sound knotted itself behind my ribs. Clay Braddock wasn't known for kindness. Neither was the land he owned, a bitter stretch of rocks and thin fields south of mine. His wife, Maylene, had gone quiet since spring. I hadn't seen her at the general store since before the baby came. Folks whispered, but no one asked outright. Not in towns like ours. Men drank and fought. Women vanished behind shut windows. By midday, I hitched the wagon and headed into town. Needed nails and maybe a tin of lamp oil if the price hadn't jumped. On the way, I stopped at Millie Hart's little roadside chapel to drop off a sack of dried beans from last harvest. She gave me a tired smile, eyes always watching more than her mouth gave away. She ain't been to Sunday in near 6 weeks, she said, folding her hands over the burlap. I didn't ask who. She didn't have to say. Heard it was a girl, I said gently. Millie nodded, then looked past me. Clay wanted a boy. All I'll say is, God don't make mistakes, but men sure like to treat him like one. I left with the words, sitting heavy, the kind you can't return to the shelf. That night, a storm rolled in low and mean. Lightning split the sky in crooked veins, and the wind pushed through the fields like it was looking for something. I sat in the dark, nursing a cup of corn whiskey, watching the front porch sway with shadows. That's when I saw her. At first, just a blur in the rain, no lantern, no horse. Then the flash of lightning hit and caught her face. Hair plastered to her cheeks, arms wrapped tight around a bundle I knew wasn't grain or wood. Her dress clung to her like wet paper, and her boots left no sound on the soaked earth. She reached the porch and didn't knock, just collapsed against the door frame like her bones had folded in. I was already on my feet, dragging the door open. Maylene, I asked. She looked up, one eye swollen, lip split. But it was her arms I watched, how tight they held the baby, like she was the last thing anchoring her to this earth. Please, she whispered, voice raw, don't send me back. I didn't move for a breath, maybe 2. Just listened to the wind and the ticking of rain off the tin roof. Then I stepped aside. She crossed the threshold with a stumble and a sob that might have broken something inside me if there was anything left to break. I fetched blankets, peeled the wet clothes from her trembling frame, careful not to look too long at the bruises. The baby, tiny, quiet, with skin like cream milk, was cold but breathing. I built the fire high and sat them close, fetching a bowl of warmed milk for the little one and tea from Maylene's shaking hands. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The only sounds were the popping of logs and the shallow breath of a child too new to know how cruel the world could be. She got a name? I asked finally. Maylene looked down at the infant, fingers brushing soft over her cheeks. Willa, she said, voice cracking like old bark. Short for Wilhelmina. My grandmother's. I nodded. Strong name. She nodded too, eyes shining but stubborn. I couldn't let him hurt her, she whispered. He said she wasn't worth the bread she'd eat. Said girls come into the world already owing men their breath. I said nothing, just tossed another log on the fire and let the sparks answer for me. Later, after she fell asleep curled on the floor by the hearth, I sat in my chair with Willa in my arms. She stared at me with eyes too wide, too knowing for a newborn, like she'd already measured the world and found it wanting. I rocked her slow. The storm still raged outside, but inside was a quiet I hadn't known since my wife passed. The house hadn't held a woman's presence since the fever took her, and our son with her, 5 winters ago. I never spoke of them now. The photos stayed turned to the wall. The cradle weed carved by hand was buried under canvas in the barn. Yet here I was, holding a child again. A stranger's. A girl unwanted by the man who should have protected her. And, somehow, she didn't feel like a stranger at all. When dawn came, soft and blue, Maylene stirred. I poured her coffee and said nothing about the future. But I knew, deep in my chest where the wire had first pulled tight, that something had changed in the night. I wasn't sure what name it had yet, but it felt a lot like beginning. The days that followed settled into a rhythm neither of us planned. Maylene slept like someone coming back from the edge, 10, 12 hours at a stretch, her body too tired to do anything but exist. She never asked how long she could stay. I never asked when she planned to go. Some truths hang in the air without needing words, like smoke from an old fire. Willa cried in short, strangled bursts, never full-throated wails, just small sounds like apologies. She had the kind of silence that made you ache, like she'd learned already not to take up too much room. I fed her as best I could with warmed milk and a dropper, wrapped her in the last of my wife's hand-sewn quilts. The edge still held her initials in brown thread, LH. I told myself it was just temporary, that they'd rest a while, gain strength, and move on. But every night, I found myself listening for the baby's breath and glancing toward the cot I'd dragged into the corner for Maylene. The house, long hollow, seemed to remember what it meant to hold life again. We kept our words few. She was still skittish, flinched if I moved too fast or raised my voice at the stovetop kettle. But she watched me with sharp, measuring eyes, like she was deciding whether I was real or just another man wearing a calm face and a cruel heart. One morning, after the frost thinned and the air turned soft with spring's early promise, I found her out in the yard, hanging laundry on the line. The sight stopped me cold. She was barefoot, hair plaited back, her skirt caught by the wind. Willa lay bundled in a basket at her feet. For a second, it was almost easy to pretend this was something ordinary, something earned. She noticed me and nodded. "Figured I'd do my part," she said. "You don't owe me chores." She looked back down at the laundry, her hands still working the clothespins. "Don't like feeling useless." I didn't press. A woman who's been made to feel like property doesn't need reminding of it. Later that afternoon, we sat on the porch while Willa napped in her basket. I passed Maylene a cup of chamomile, and she took it with both hands like it might vanish if she let go. "I was 16 when Clay married me," she said, voice quiet. I kept my eyes on the horizon. "He told my father he'd give him 2 mules and a silver watch. Pa agreed before I even had my boots laced. Said I'd been more mouth than worth anyway." She sipped the tea, pausing. I didn't interrupt. First year, he was fine, mean but quiet. Then the babies didn't come, and he blamed me. Said God had made me wrong. When I finally carried, it was twins. Both boys. Stillborn. Her voice cracked just once. She steadied it. He didn't speak to me for months. Not till I got pregnant again. This time, I knew it was a girl. I just knew. Felt gentler inside. She stared out past the porch rail. When I birthed her, he wouldn't even touch her. Said I'd shamed him. Said she'd grow up to be nothing but a burden. Then he started talking about selling us off to some trader near the border. Said he could use the coin better than the company. My knuckles tightened around the cup. I didn't speak. I knew what fury sounded like inside a man's own skull, and I didn't want to let it out just yet. "I took Willa and ran the night he passed out drunk," she said. "Walked 10 miles in the dark. Didn't know where I was going. Just remembered your place was over the ridge. Figured, maybe you'd still have some good left in you." I turned to her. "Why me?" She looked down at the cup, then at Willa's tiny form curled in the basket. "'Cause I seen how you buried your wife. Quiet. Careful. Like it mattered. That kind of grief don't come from a man who never loved." The air between us felt heavy, but not choking. Like the weight of something finally spoken after too long buried. She stood, stretched her arms, and went to fetch the baby. Willa stirred, let out a soft grunt, then settled back into Maylene's arms like they'd always been together. Inside, I made stew while she rocked the child in the creaking chair by the window. She hummed a tune I didn't recognize, low and wordless, the kind that carries more memory than melody. And as the sky dimmed to dusk, I caught myself watching them longer than I meant to. Later, after they slept, I sat out on the porch alone. The wind had settled. The stars blinked steady overhead. I lit my pipe and leaned back, listening to the hush of the prairie and the faint creak of that chair still swinging in my mind. I thought of how Maylene hadn't asked for protection. She hadn't begged or wept or made herself small. She'd simply shown up, broken but whole enough to try. And Willa, Lord, that child. She didn't cry much, but when she did, it felt like a reckoning. The house was no longer a tomb. It was still scarred, same as all of us, but it breathed again, quietly, steadily. I didn't know what was coming. Didn't know how long they'd stay, or if Clay Braddock would come looking. But I knew this much. I wasn't letting that girl grow up learning she was a burden. Not under my roof. Not on my watch. The sheriff showed up 5 days later. Came just after dawn, boots crunching over the frost-laced dirt as his shadow stretched across the porch. I was feeding the hens out back when I heard his voice call out, calm but too official to ignore. Boone. I stepped out, wiping my hands on my trouser leg. Sheriff Ira Blevins wasn't the kind of man to knock twice. He wore his hat low and his coat buttoned high, like he always expected trouble, even on Sundays. "Morning, Ira," I said. "Morning. Mind if I step in a minute?" His tone was polite but firm. I nodded and we walked inside. Maylene was at the stove, with her back stiff, pretending to stir something. Willa lay swaddled in the cradle, which I dragged out from under the barn canvas 2 nights ago. It had dust in the carvings and a broken spindle I'd mended with twine. Funny how things come back into use just when you stop expecting them to. Ira tipped his hat to Maylene. She nodded barely. "I'll get to it plain," he said, eyes flicking from her to me. "Clay Braddock came to town yesterday, all fire and spit. Claims his wife ran off with his daughter. Says he aims to have them both back." I didn't speak. "He's filed it as a missing persons, Boone," Ira continued. "Says you're harboring her against her will." Maylene laughed then, dry and sharp. "Did he tell you about the bruises?" she said. "Or the time he locked me in the root cellar for a day and a half with no light? Did he mention trying to sell us off like hogs at market?" Ira shifted, uncomfortable. He was a decent man, but his badge weighed heavier when pressed between truth and law. "I believe you, Maylene," he said soft. "I do. But Clay's got standing. You're still his wife under state record. The child's is by name. She's no one's property," I said. Ira sighed and pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Court date's set. 2 weeks from now in Larkspur. He's demanding custody. If you two don't show, they'll send a rider. Maybe worse." Maylene turned pale. She backed a step, bumping into the stove. I could see the fight in her start to fray at the edges, like fabric rubbed too thin. Ira set the paper on my table, touched the brim of his hat, and left without another word. The door shut with a thud, and the house held its breath. I picked up the summons, scanned the print. Legal talk. Custodial rights. Violation of spousal obligation. It was written in ink, but it read like shackles. "He'll win," Maylene said quietly. "He's a man. I've got no money, no family, no proof." "You've got me," I said. She looked at me like she didn't know whether to believe it. "I'll speak for you. We'll ride into Larksbog together, and I'll say what needs saying. I've seen the bruises. I've seen the fear. That court hears me. It might not go the way Clay thinks." She crossed her arms, hugging herself. "And if it does?" I didn't answer right away. My hands curled into fists at my sides. "If it does," I said slowly, "then I stop following the law and start following my gut." We spent the next week preparing. I taught Maylene how to speak plain and direct when asked hard questions. We washed Willa, bundled her in the best of what we had, and borrowed a proper dress from Millie Hart that didn't carry the past in every stitch. I even shaved for the first time in months, though my face felt too bare, too strange without the scruff. But the night before the trial, something shifted. Maylene couldn't sleep. I heard her pacing in the dark, then the soft creak of the door. I found her standing under the stars, barefoot again. Willa wrapped her chest. "I can't let him see her," she said, voice barely above the wind. "Not even once. You don't know what he's capable of, Boone." I stepped closer, slow. "You're safe here." She shook her head. "No, not if I let the court decide what's right. The court don't know this child. They don't know the sound she makes in her sleep, or how she curls her fingers when she dreams. They don't know that Clay's already killed something inside me. I won't give him a chance to finish the job with her. I didn't try to change her mind. There are moments in a person's life when choice is an illusion. This wasn't about running. This was about saving something sacred. We leave before dawn, I said. I know a place over in the foothills. Old mining cabin nobody uses. We can ride there. Lay low. Her eyes searched mine for hesitation. She found none. So while the rest of the world slept under its own blind justice, we packed what we could into 2 saddlebags. I saddled my mare, tossed in jerky and dried apples, wrapped Willa in layers, and left a note for Ira by the gate. Didn't say much, just the truth. She's not running. I'm taking her home. And just before the horizon turned gold with morning, we rode out toward the mountains, toward something that wasn't safety exactly, but was free. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was leaving anything behind, only riding toward something worth keeping. The cabin wasn't much, 3 walls solid, the 4th a patchwork of nailed-up planks and a curtain made from an old feed sack, but it held. Wind howled some nights like it wanted in, but we kept the fire alive and the baby warm. In that small room, Maylene and I learned to breathe again. She hung strips of cloth to soften the echo, and I patched the roof with birch bark and tar. Willa grew steadier in my arms by the day, her cries bolder, her eyes clearer. When she smiled for the first time, really smiled, it near broke me. Like the land itself had decided to try blooming again. Ira found us 3 weeks later. Rode up slow, hands open. I met him out front with my rifle unloaded, but visible. Still wearing that badge? I asked. Still trying to do right by it, he answered. Maylene stood behind me, Willa bundled against her chest. Ira took off his hat, stared down at the frostbitten ground for a beat. Clay Braddock's dead, he said. Maylene went still. Even Willa quieted, like the wind around us had sucked all the noise from the world. Caught a bullet down near Bridge Hollow. Ira went on. Word is, he picked a fight he couldn't finish. Nobody mourned him long. I turned to Maylene. Her face was unreadable, too calm. I ain't here to drag you back, Ira said. There's no court date now. No man left to claim anything. Then why'd you come? I asked. He looked up and met my eyes. 'Cause someone has to put a stop to rumors. Folks in town are saying she stole the baby. Saying you're hiding a criminal. Maylene stiffened. She's not a criminal, I said. I know that, Ira said gently. The law don't move on feelings, Boone. It moves on papers. Records. So what now? I brought forms, he said, lifting a small satchel. Custody. Adoption. You sign, I witness. Court and Larkspiegel stamp it quiet if no one contests. It ain't flashy, but it's clean. Legal. Maylene's fingers gripped tighter around Willa. Can you read it all to me? She asked. Every word. He did. Sat on a log and read every line slow. Then handed me the pen. I signed first. My name didn't shake. Then Maylene signed. Her new name, not the old one. She'd started going by Maylene Hart. Said it felt closer to her own bones. Ira signed last, folded the papers, and tucked them away like he was holding something sacred. You two deserve peace, he said, mounting his horse. I'll see to it best I can. Then he rode off, leaving nothing but hoof prints in the snow and the promise of silence. That night, we lit a candle. Not for mourning, not for fear, but for memory. Maylene sat cross-legged on the floor, Willa sleeping in her lap. I watched them from the doorway, my coat still dusted with snow. I don't know how to be a mother, she whispered. You already are one, I said. She looked up at me. And you? You ever think you'd be a father again? I didn't answer right away. I walked over, knelt beside her, laid a hand on Willa's tiny back. Her heartbeat was steady as rain on a roof. No, I said, but I reckon I'll learn. We stayed in that cabin through the thaw. Built shelves, hunted game, taught Willa her first words under skies too wide to hold regrets. Maylene started writing letters to herself, to the baby, to no one. She read them out loud sometimes. Each word sounded like healing. The past didn't vanish, but it loosened its grip. We didn't pretend nothing had happened, but we stopped letting it decide who we were. In the spring, we moved back to the ranch. I rebuilt the barn, repainted the porch rail. Maylene planted sunflowers along the fence. said she wanted Willa to grow up knowing beauty was something you could make yourself. Ira visited from time to time, always with news, always with respect. The town didn't ask questions anymore. Folks came to trade eggs, to borrow tools. No one brought up clay. No one dared. Willa learned to walk on my porch steps. Her laugh rang louder than any ghost still clinging to that land. She called me Pa before her second birthday, and Maylene cried soft into my shoulder that night. Sometimes I still wonder what would have happened if I turned her away. If I'd said, "Not my fight," and shut the door. But that thought never lingers long. Because I remember the sound of Willa's first laugh, Maylene's voice singing while stirring stew, the creak of the cradle my wife once built holding life again. I didn't save them, not really. They saved me. And this land, scarred, stubborn, unforgiving, had grown a family where none should have taken root. Some stories don't need legends or gunfights. Just a porch, a fire, and the quiet choice to love what others cast aside.